Sal, Anna, and especially Douglas. Before I can begin, I have to acknowledge that we're really in the wrong location. We were supposed to have this gathering at the Arlington tennis courts, but we had to call it off because the courts were a little too wet today. Cliff, I know, is disappointed, and we promised him we'll have a gathering there yet when the time is right. He was such a beloved man. He was, in certain ways, an old-fashioned man and father. He believed in the value of education, personal discipline, and doing things right, along with persistence and hard work. He didn't always talk a lot. A good time with him was sitting together watching a game, and he showed his caring not so much with words as with gifts, as well as with his enduring faith and commitment to those he loved. He took his responsibilities as a gentleman seriously. And long before it was fashionable, Cliff was a modern, progressive man and father. He believed deeply in an opportunity for all, treating everyone with great respect, and he would not tolerate racism or prejudice in others. He believed in his children and grandchildren, coaching Doug on what he had to do in order to take a trip independently to Europe when he was 15, helping his adult kids return to school to pursue their educations, taking Amelia to Yosemite for her 18th birthday. He was generous with all that he had. Cliff Erickson liked to say that he was a descendant of the Vikings, but more recently he came from good Americans' working class stock. His mother was an Okie and his father an Arkie. Cliff himself was born in Las Vegas, New Mexico on February 7th, 1930. Cliff's father worked on the Shasta Dam and other construction projects around the West, so that Cliff grew up in a variety of small places. An early favorite was Yuma, Arizona. During his teenage years, he was in the California Central Valley, just outside Redding. He used to ride his horse to middle school and hunt rattlesnakes on the weekends. On school breaks, he and his buddies would saddle up their horses and head up into the mountains for extended camping trips of a week or two. One day, after a major dispute with his buddies about who would get the first turn on their new rope swing, Cliff finally won and triumphantly was enjoying that very first swing when the rope broke and he ended up with a broken arm. Although not themselves highly educated, Cliff's parents instilled in him a deep respect for learning and education. All the same, he once dropped out of high school to take a job in a local store in order to help the family out. He wasn't there long before the football coach, who also was the high school's math teacher, walked in and said to him, "Cliff Erickson, take off that apron and come back to school." Perhaps it was not a coincidence that Cliff began his own career as a math teacher. After graduating from Shasta High, Cliff headed for the big city. He found the University of California in Berkeley inhospitable and cold, and after an unsuccessful start, he gave up and went back home. His mother met him at the door and said, "Sonny, you turn right around and don't come back until you get into college." Cliff found his way to USF, where he was welcomed and appreciated. He also at one point visited the University of Arkansas, where his grandmother had offered to pay his way. However, after encountering racism in the community and in his own relatives, he promptly left and came back to California. His education continued at the University of Arizona, where he received his first MA in teaching, and later at USC, where he studied counseling under Carl Rogers and developed his lifelong loyalty to the Trojans. Cliff's long career in education, which we heard about so movingly, began at De Anza High and continued as a counselor at Richmond High, where he later met Ellie. He went on to serve as both a vice principal and a middle school principal. For many years, in addition to his day job, he worked evenings as the vice principal of the Albany Adult School, where he expanded the offerings and pioneered in bringing computer-assisted technology to the classroom. It was not always easy being Cliff's kid. He could be a demanding, uncompromising, and stubborn father with high standards for himself and high expectations for his children. He had a fierce temper. And, as Misha said, He only wanted the best for his children and did everything in his power to help them. Ruth explained, he believed that education was the main ingredient to leading a happy life, and he would never stop reminding his kids of this. He offered financial support to all of his kids in order to ensure that we all had the freedom to study without having to also work. This generous offer extended for those who wanted to continue with their education at a more mature age. He had great faith in each of you. As Doug told me, his words and confidence in me gave me the power to accomplish many things in my life. As a grandparent, Cliff was a star. He showed up for Grandparents' Day at school, for recitals and games, and on other special occasions. Neil summed it up this way: strict but awesome. His gift-giving was legendary, to the point sometimes of being perhaps over the top. Amelia's love for animals, now being realized as she studies to become a vet, is surely connected to the 10 enormous stuffed animals she received at her very first Christmas. Margie explained, he was an astute observer, and his gifts reflected his detailed knowledge of the personality of the recipient. He would take so much time going through toy catalogs and toy stores, carefully finding just the right, creative, educational, often handmade, fun gift for each grandchild. For example, like Neil's first USC baseball cap. Zara, too, mentioned his gifts. He was really good at giving gifts, so he was always able to see that moment of pure elation on our faces when we opened our presents, whether it be a wooden horse stable, a doll, or a giant stuffed animal. We didn't talk too much, but the gifts really said it all. Cliff loved dogs, a love he shared with Bridget and so many of you. Maddie remembers being there with Cliff and Ellie when they went to pick up Shayna and bring her home, and Sarah will remember the many fun walks she took with her grandfather and with Shayna. Cliff liked being active and being around people. He took up tennis as an adult, and it became his greatest passion. He truly loved it, and he found a second home on the courts. In recent years, Jake told me he made a whole circle of new friends at the gym when he started attending when he was 74. On Labor Day and other holidays, he was ever so happy and fulfilled when he was standing in front of the barbecue in the backyard or attending the block party. Many of you told me about Thanksgiving and Christmas as special occasions for the family to come together, and everyone who was there will always remember kayaking and having fun at the big family trip to Mexico. For more than 37 years, Cliff and Ellie found fulfillment together as educators, parents, grandparents, and beloved companions. Together with Jacob and John and other members of the family, they enjoyed trips to Hawaii, the Grand Canyon, and to Yosemite. Ellie and Cliff were on vacation in Mexico, looking forward to playing tennis when Cliff's final decline began. Throughout his illness, everyone came as often as possible, and Ellie never left his side. He was the love of her life, and her affection and commitment never wavered for a moment. In these last days, she was so happy to give him the best comfort and care she could, giving her undivided attention to rubbing his feet or just sitting with him and holding his hand. You told me many more loving stories of your father and grandfather, more than I could possibly include in these short remarks. I encourage you to tell all the ones that I wasn't able to fit in, along with so many others that you are remembering now with each other. And that way, you will together weave the tapestry of memory of this beloved man. May his memory be for blessing, and let us say, Amen. Let's remember him together now. I invite you, if you're able to, please stand, and let's turn and say, let's read together, we will remember on the inside of our program booklets. In the rising of the sun, and in its going down, we will remember. In the blowing of the wind, and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening buds, and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves, and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year, and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, let us remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, let us remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, let us remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now part of us. One who lives no more echoes still within our thoughts and words, and what he did is part of what we have become. Each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world, and each one is the breath of the ultimate one. And affirming the one, we affirm the worth of each one, whose life now ended, brought us closer to the source of life, in whose unity no one is alone, and every life finds purpose. For Cliff's life, love that united us in life from which death cannot sever, for his companionship which we shared along life's path, which still continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of heart and mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. I invite those who wish to join now in the Jewish mourner's prayer, the Kaddish found on the back page. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah Bi'alma Divarach Rute v'Yamlich Malchute v'Chayechon u'v'Yomechon v'Chayedechol Beit Yisrael ba'Agalah u'Bizman Kariv v'Imru Yehei Shmei Rabbah Muvarach Leolam Olmei Olmaya Yitbarach v'Yishtabach v'Yitpa'ar v'Yitramam v'Yitnaseh v'Yitadar v'Yitaleh v'Yitalal Shmei Kudusha v'Richu Le'elah min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom v'Ramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn comfort all who are bereaved, here and everywhere, and let us say, Amen. Began this service by saying how we come together at times like this in need of comfort and solace. Let's conclude now by turning to those near us with gestures and words of comfort and consolation.